Welcome to Kansas Ag Reports. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, we talk with Dr. Roger McEowen for the Washburn School of Law. He is an ag and tax specialist there. It's our monthly conversation with him. We'll also have updates from the Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Department of Agriculture, as well as Kansas Grain Sorghum, a weekly update from the Kansas Livestock Association, and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
Well, in agriculture news, despite the cattle inventory plummeting to the lowest level in some 73 years, the number of cattle on feed remains surprisingly strong. Cattle and calves on feed in the slaughter market for the U.S. with feedlots of capacity of 1,000 or more head total 11.6 million head October 1. That number slightly below the inventory October 1st of last year. That included 7 million steers and steer calves, up 1% from the previous year. Heifers and heifer calves accounted for 4.6 million head, down 1% from 2023. Feedlot placements in September totaled 2.16 million head. That's 2% below last year, and net placements at 2.1 million head. Fed cattle marketings in September, 1.7 million head, 2% below 2023. The average all-fresh retail price for beef hit a record high in 6 of the last 7 months. The cash price paid to farmers fell from July through September. Well, corn farmers could be in for one of the worst years in close to 2 decades, economists say. The Federal Reserve reports the crop prices remain unprofitably low in the latest assessment of economic conditions. Their latest beige book largely confirmed that things were already thinking, according to Dr. Michael Langmeyer, who is an economist at Purdue University. He says with the dismal crop prices standing in stark contrast to sog livestock sector, he said it's one of the worst years for corn and sorghum prices since the ethanol boom in 2007. High input costs following COVID have created more of a difficult environment for row croppers, he said. The declining crop prices have been providing a boom to the livestock industry by lowering feed costs. And U.S. soybean harvest wrapping up with expected record yields, and South American farmers already working on the 24-25 planting season. Now, some ag economists say Argentina may see its largest soybean acreage expansion in more than a decade. Brazil's plantings are also expected to grow, albeit at the slowest pace in some 10 years. This surge in supply, driven by potential record production in both countries, could further depress international soybean prices in the months ahead. Brazil's national supply company, CONAB, says Brazil's soybean acres is projected to grow by 2.8%, reaching 117 million acres. This does mark the slowest growth in some 10 years, driven by lower profit margins for farmers. And if weather conditions are favorable, the 24-25 South American soybean crop forecast to reach 6.1 billion bushels. That's a 13% increase over the previous harvest. Argentinian soybean crop projected to hit 1.91 billion bushels. That's Ag News. More coming up on the Kansas Ag Report.
The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
And joining us once again is Dr. Roger McEowen, who is an ag and tax law specialist at the Washburn School of Law. Time for our monthly conversation. Good morning, Dr. McEowen.
Good morning. Good to be with you, Ken.
Okay, we've got 3 things we want to tackle, and these are quite something. You probably got a lot of phone calls. I know I've received a lot of phone calls and correspondence on this Farm Act that's in Congress. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and you're right, Ken. I have been contacted quite a bit. I wrote about it in my Substack publications, which people can subscribe to. But yeah, we started the tax schools for K-State across the state, and we have focused on the Farm Act for practitioners, and some farmers attend those, but primarily tax preparers, and they've gone through it as to what might occur. This was introduced within the last couple of weeks by Representative Kelly out of Mississippi, and it has really good, strong bipartisan support. Now, I know some think that it's not going to pass, but I do think it may not pass as is, but it'll pass. Um, and I'm convinced it's going to pass during the lame duck session. I think it will, and it might be rolled into an omnibus piece of legislation. So there will be some version of this passed, but it's designed to provide emergency assistance to producers of certain crops for the 2024 crop year. And that is specific. It's just for the 2024 crop year. And the way it's worded and the formulas involved in it, I think it could result for large payments to a lot of farmers.
Well, it looks like, and I may be in that camp where, I don't know if it's going to pass or not, but I think if it does, it's going to be probably in an altered form,
Yeah,
just because somebody else has got to put their fingers on it. But
yeah,
these are large numbers, and I know
yeah.
talking to some farmers, they are really kind of hoping and kind of needing it to meet the needs they need to finish out the year.
Well, and I would tell you the bankers are in the same view of it too. I just finished a national or a state annual bankers conference in the Dakotas and went through this. And boy, the bankers were encouraged by this too. But all crops are eligible for the payments. And so the payments, however, depending on the type of crop, are calculated in different ways. For your 8 major crops that are listed in the legislation, they have one formula, then the other crops have a different formula. And the major crops in Kansas would be corn and soybeans and wheat is in there, and sorghum also. That's 4 of the 8 major crops. And the formula on this is pretty straightforward. The one thing that I like about the bill, frankly, is that you have Congress specifying to USDA the formula. It's not left up to the bureaucrats to mess around with the formula. The Congress has specified that. So I think that's a great aspect of it. So what they're doing is they're just taking the USDA projected crop cost for a crop, for a particular crop, and then subtracting off the national projected returns. And then they're taking that sum, multiplying it times your eligible acres, which is your planted acres in 2024. It's not your base acres, it's all your acres you planted in 2024. And then take that result times 60%, that's your payment.
It sounds like if you kind of know your numbers, you can make those projections. And God bless the Farm Service Agency people that I know are going to
Well,
be in charge of making that
yeah,
happen, right?
based on current prices, the payment per acre for corn would be $103, and for
Yep.
soybeans it'd be 48, and for wheat it would be 82.
Right.
Sorghum is a lot lower than that, but nevertheless, that's a pretty good payment.
Absolutely. Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law is joining us. It's our monthly conversation about things in agriculture going through our legal system. We're going to take a break. Got a couple more to talk about. We'll do that when we return.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
And Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law is joining us. And Dr. McEowen, a couple other things we want to talk about. And one deals with, oh boy, the EPA and their draft strategy. They came out to handle some situations. This is meeting some resistance.
Yeah, it is, and it probably should. This is the result of one of these sue and settle type situations where you had an environmental activist group that sued the EPA for supposedly failing to meet its obligations under the Endangered Species Act. And so the EPA came out with this draft strategy. And I would emphasize it is a draft strategy. So this is not, they're not implementing this yet, I would say. But we've got to look at what the draft strategy is so we know what might be coming. And many farmers would be impacted by this. What it is a pesticide review process, and then how that applies to the application of chemicals to farmland. And they say it would apply to 264 million acres of farmland that were planted to crops in 2022 that used herbicides and other pesticides. So, because there's a lot of endangered and threatened species that have a substantial portion of their habitat on private land, this becomes a big deal. More so in other states perhaps than Kansas, but how they apply this is, we'll have to wait to see. But they could have, what they have in here are what they call spray drift mitigation procedures. And that might require the planting of a fence row, a hedge row, the use of hooded sprayers, the reduction of your application rate, depending on the level of risk. And then I think the real challenge about this for farmers, if they implement this, are the buffer zone requirements. Potentially every ground spray could require a 200-foot buffer, and every aerial application a 500-foot buffer. And so if that is put in place, I think that would result in a significant acreage not being treated due to the possibility of downwind spray drift.
Okay, and that's one that, boy, it takes a lot more than time we have to discuss, but something we definitely need to take a look at. The other thing we want to wrap up with is talking about the build that wall down on the southern border and possible NEPA violations.
Yeah, not possible. The court found a NEPA violation that the Biden administration violated environmental law by not conducting a required environmental impact statement upon discontinuing the border wall and also discontinuing Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. And of course, what NEPA is, it's been in for over 50 years. And it says that when the government undertakes a major federal action, they have to consider the environmental, ecological effects on that action. And that's what an environmental impact statement is. Well, you have ranchers along the border, and the lead plaintiff in this case is an Arizona rancher whose ranch basically got trashed by people illegally trespassing across our southern border onto his ranch. They cut his fences. They stole water out of his wells. They left trash behind, which his cows ate and died. And he sued and said that there was no environmental impact statement done by the Biden administration before they made those decisions. And the court said, yeah, you're right. Not only does that apply when the government undertakes an action or proposes to undertake an action, that also applies when they discontinue a major federal action. And since they didn't do that, he's entitled to damages now.
Wow. All right, Dr. McEowen, if folks want to learn more about what we've talked about today, I know you've written about all of these. How can they find more?
Well, there are various places they can find this. Right now, the law school is redoing the website and plugging mine in, so mine's kind of hard to find. It's actually dark right now. But I share this with Ag Manager over at K-State. That's through the Department of Ag Econ. So the Ag Manager website is where you can find this at, and on my Substack, which is McEowenaglawandtax.substack.com.
Okay, very good. As always, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We'll talk to you next month.
Thank you, Ken.
Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. He is an ag and tax law specialist, joins us monthly to talk about agriculture and our legal system. We'll take a break. Back with more in a moment.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
In the winter, we start working on planters and focus on making sure everything is mechanically ready, because the most important thing about farming is putting the crop in the ground. Technology has came around a long ways in, I would say, 25 years. I remember when I was in high school, my dad started variable rate planting, and it was a manual deal. And that's something else we do in the winter. On our technology is going through, and we can put prescriptions into what we want to plant where. If you want to plant a certain number of seeds in this part of the field, a certain part of that. That technology is to the point where all you do is put it in your computer in the tractor or combine sprayer. It's set and it will change itself. I think the best thing that our kids like about it is being able to see what's happening. Going through the field, either planting or in harvest, they can actually watch a map and see things turn on, shut off, see the rates of what's going down, how much you don't waste by seeing every little bitty time it turns on and off. And then they can actually watch where you're at and exactly what you're doing from an overhead view, rather than just sitting in a cab looking forward. Soil health is important because without the right nutrients in the ground, the corn can't grow to its best potential. We farm all no-till, and no-till basically means what it says. You don't till. No tillage. It works in our operation. Part of the country is different, and our ground is really steep and hilly, and why we don't break the ground up is that helps the ground from, you know, slipping away from us. So that's why it helps keep our fertilizer in our ground and our conservation intact too. Beyond the technology and the equipment, there's technology in the seed too. The technology in the seed actually helps protect it from weather, from bugs, from outside matters that farmers can't control. And that helps the corn grow better, faster, safer. It keeps it safer for the end product that actually ends up on the grocery store. So the technology is in equipment, in that puts it in the ground, but it's also in the seed that grows.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
The official results are in for quality testing for the U.S. hard red winter crop, and Kansas Wheat is set to share the story of this past year's growing season with global buyers by participating in the annual crop quality seminars organized by U.S. Wheat Associates. U.S. Wheat produces an annual crop quality report that includes grade, flour, dough, and baking data for 5 of the 6 U.S. wheat classes. The report provides essential objective information to help buyers get the wheat they need at the best value possible. To produce the annual report, U.S. Wheat compiles comprehensive data from analyzing hundreds of samples conducted during and after harvest by partner organizations and laboratories. For this year's report, 575 hard red winter wheat samples were collected from grain elevators in 40 reporting areas. According to the report, the Gulf exportable crop experienced variable conditions, including persistent early dryness that resulted in slightly smaller kernels and mid-season moisture that boosted yields and test weights. This year's data showed the crop is greatly improved over previous years, including a balance of protein, strong grade characteristics, and good milling properties. According to the report, overall, this crop meets or exceeds the typical hard red winter contract specifications and should provide high value to customers. Now that the analysis is complete and the report is published, the focus shifts to the annual series of crop quality seminars during which the U.S. Wheat Associates and teams of farmers and experts present the results and have conversations directly with customers in their home markets.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
Our farmers and ranchers in western Kansas, in the Midwest total, with the long drought, I don't know how they would have made it without the Farm Bill. We're talking about 4 or 5 years of catastrophic crop losses and crop insurance and aid through the Farm Bill were many times the only ways some of these family farms made it through. Farming's a risky business because of the weather, because of all the unknowns. It provides for some stability within our community, and this just allows us a little bit of security to know that we can pay our bills in the end. We raise cattle, sheep, and then we grow corn, soybeans, and hay. We incorporate all three on all of our farm ground. We plant cover crops, we graze crop residue. We have livestock pretty much year-round on some piece of farm ground. We've partnered with the Natural Resource and Conservation Service to put in some buffer strips along creek banks that protect our watersheds. We've also started planting cover crops and used technical assistance from them in planting those cover crops. We also have quite extensively used the EQIP program to remove invasive species from our native range. So EQIP has partnered with us to control and to bring some of our pastures back. In our crop ground, they've helped us with technical advice when it comes to cover crops and no-till and things that we can do to save some of our soil. Well, I think second to our national security is food security, and the knowledge that we have a safe, abundant food supply in our grocery stores at all time. I think that benefits all of us to not worry about where our food's going to come from. We got a little taste of that during COVID. I think that drove home the message of why the Farm Bill is so critical, not only to farmers and ranchers, but also to consumers.
What does a brighter, more sustainable future look like in our cities and towns, and how do we get there? When New York needed an alternative fuel source to reduce carbon emissions, the city found what it needed in biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil.
The Kansas Cowboy Hall of Fame Committee has named 5 individuals to be inducted this year during a ceremony in Dodge City, November 2nd. Those to be honored and the category in which they are to be inducted include Ernie Rodina, Ottawa, Cowboy Entertainer, L. Dean Holthus, Smith Center, Cowboy Historian, Brad Tate, Lakin, Rancher, Cattleman, Rex Bugby, Medicine Lodge, Rodeo Cowboy, and Charles Albert Vest of Phillipsburg, Working Cowboy. In addition to the 5 inductees, a special honor in memory of Toby Keith will be given at this year's ceremony. Keith penned his first #1 country hit, Should Have Been a Cowboy, in Dodge City. The song was released in 1993. The dinner and induction ceremony will be held at 6 p.m. at the Boot Hill Casino and Resort Conference Center. Tickets are $35 and reservations can be made by going to boothill.org. Festivities surrounding the induction ceremony will take place all weekend at the Boot Hill Museum as they welcome the Western Cattle Trail Association's annual conference that will be commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Western Cattle Trail. Tickets for the conference are $75 and can be purchased at westerncattletrailsassociation.com. The Boot Hill Museum has been home to the Kansas Cowboy Hall of Fame since 2002.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and Liberty Link that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
This is Aaron with Pinion Risk Management, here to talk about the markets. The long-awaited elections have finally happened, and now we wait to see what our marketing environment will look like for the next 4 years. I am sure that we will have new opportunities and challenges to the demand for U.S. production going forward, and it will all work out for the best in the long run. Initial reaction to the election results had corn up 7 cents on the opening of Wednesday morning's trade. Beans were down initially in the overnights, but as the trade opened Wednesday, we ended up seeing a rally back of almost 25 cents. Other commodities outside of the grains had some strong reactions as well. Crude oil had a strong negative reaction, followed by a similar recovery as the beans, while gold did hang on to its negative movement for the day on Wednesday, and not to see some recovery until Thursday. Back to the grains, we have been seeing better corn demand for exports and ethanol, with this week's export sales data expected to come in between 1.7 and 2.5 million metric tons versus 2.34 million metric tons last week. Weekly ethanol numbers were up to 1.105 million barrels per day, up 60,000 barrels per day compared to last year. With demand a bit stronger, I don't think it is unlikely to see the USDA adjust ending stocks down to the 1.8 to 1.9 billion bushel range. Despite the recent export sales in beans, questions remain as to the future with the new administration coming in. Hopefully, in the long run, we will see positive results from the assumed trade discussions the U.S. will be having with China over the next 4 years. But I think China will be hesitant to be a big buyer of U.S. beans in the meantime. South American weather has been more cooperative as of late, continuing to give China a cheaper alternative to source their beans. If you have any questions or would like to talk to someone about a plan for your marketing, you can reach us at 888-452-8751. I am Aaron Summer with Pinion Risk Management.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff. Progress powered by Kansas farmers.
That's our program this week. Thank you so much for joining us. You can be social with us online, kansasagreport.net, or our social media channels. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on the Kansas Ag Report.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.